See.
Well, hello there,
Mr. Benoit, good afternoon to you, sir.
Mr. Tal. How are you, my friend?
I am well. I am well. What are you up to? What did you do last night?
Well, I actually slept. You didn't, from what I heard, but
That is
I will,
sadly true.
I will tell you, because you've been up since what, 1:45 in the morning? Something
That
crazy.
is right. That is right.
There's a lot of alcohol that can help you with that, just so you know.
Not in the context of what I'm up to, but yes, I appreciate that there would be some alcohol. Actually, what I really need is coffee.
True.
Really good, strong coffee. That would be very helpful right now.
There you go. I'm sure there's some great places in Tampa.
There are great places in Slovenia, Mike, right? I mean, is coffee a thing in Slovenia? Is there like everywhere in the world people drink coffee, but how is the coffee in Slovenia?
You're asking me?
I am indeed, sir.
Well,
Aren't you there?
I'm glad you asked. Slovenia actually is right next to Italy, which has got to be the coffee capital of the world. So the great thing about Slovenian coffee, also pretty similar to Italian coffee, is it's like motor oil, right? You get it and you're like instantly awake. Where you go, like now when I go back to America and I do a Starbucks and it's just like brown water, it's like I could swim in
Brown
it.
sludge.
Yeah.
Does it taste like motor oil, or is it just just an analogy?
No, it's
wonderful.
Fantastico.
It's delicious. How do you say delicious in Slovenian?
That's a great question. After being here for like 12 years, I don't know. I think we just say bon appetito.
Is that right?
Bueno, yeah.
Italian there? Is it mostly Italian that they speak?
No, we speak Slovene, but they don't speak. So the funny story is my entire family, here is Slovene. Even my kids speak Slovene. I don't speak. I can say like wine, like vino, and coffee, like kava. And then they actually, going back to coffee, they put whipped cream but unsweetened. So you get a kava smetano and you get this like beautiful little coffee with like this swirl. It's so great. But everybody in my family speaks English. So I'm begging, I'm like, please guys, I'm not going to learn to speak this language if you don't talk to me in your native tongue. And they're like, oh, sure, Dad, we'll speak to you. And so like, I'm finally giving up. I'm like, all right, you guys are obviously.
I think they probably don't want you to understand what they're saying about you behind your back.
They don't, because they're always like chatting about me.
Of course they are.
And I know they're scheming.
Yeah.
Anything about it.
Children and scheming. I can't imagine.
Shocking. Not my kids, especially. They're little monsters.
I'll share a story about Italian coffee later on. But you know what, Tal? I don't know if you realize this. In fact, I think you do. We have Mike Murphy on the show today. That's this Slovenian guy we got.
Is that right? Wow, that's the most. That is. By the way, just for the sake of our audience, Mike Murphy is the most common name in Slovenia. A little known fact. That is the most Slovenian name. Am I right, Mike, about that, or am I a little off base?
You're 100% right. The population is about 2 million people, and about 1.7 are all named Mike Murphy.
Wow.
So it's a little confusing at times.
Probably have the worst mail service.
That's incredible. World. But you know what? The phone book, however, was
super
very, very easy to produce.
Yeah, it's like a pamphlet.
They just cloned the name. Nice. Copy and paste a
lot. Well, since he's so well known in Slovenia, let's get him to be well known to our listening audience. How about that? Does that sound cool?
That sounds awesome.
So Mike Murphy, his first job was that he animated the robots in Disneyland, which sounds very, very fun. Also a little creepy. I think
I was just thinking the same thing, actually.
I got a little accosted by a walking, talking garbage can once, which was
yeah. Okay, cool. That's very cool.
I'm glad you approve.
And then in person.
And then Mike went on to spend over 15 years as a very well-respected visual effects artist in Hollywood, where he worked on such small budget, no-name films like Harry Potter, Iron Man, Fast and Furious, and Lord of the Rings. Maybe one day, if you're lucky, they'll get popular and people actually find those and see them. During that time, Mike tells us, and I quote, he got paid to build other people's dreams. And at some point, he decided, which was not satisfying enough for him, he decided to go and become his own entrepreneur. He launched his very first online business, mentoring animation students online, and found immediate success. Once he got bit by the entrepreneurial bug, which leaves a mark, by the way, there was no turning back. Soon,
What part of your body were you bitten in? I'm just
I
curious.
can't say. There might be
Okay.
children.
This might be a
Understood.
family podcast. Soon, other entrepreneurs were asking Mike to help apply storytelling principles to their offers and their marketing. We'll dive into how people found him in this conversation and what lessons our viewers and listeners can draw from it. This led Mike to create a 7-figure consulting company that helps experts create personal brands.
Before or after the decimal? I'm just curious.
I'm going to assume after.
Before the
Like
decimal.
0.7.
So
Yeah.
7 and then decimal and then more numbers. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Just
Yeah.
making sure.
Or
Okay.
no, I
'Cause,
think
you know,
it's
you can't put the decimal and then
first.
have 7 numbers after the decimal, and it's still arguably a 7-figure consulting practice worth less than
You
$1.
could do that. Yeah, I guess if it was before, my consulting practice is worth 70 cents, which is
That's awesome.
amazing. That deserves its own podcast.
Did we get the wrong Mike Murphy in Slovenia?
Wait, we
wanted
need
the
the other Slovenian Mike Murphy.
That other guy. So anyway, he created this wonderful, very healthy bottom line 7-figure consulting company that helps experts create personal brands, digital courses, and content machines. He developed a personal brand and comprehensive digital course called the Visionary Planner System, which we'll learn more about today. And then he's going to share his personal story, his professional story. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today on the Braving Business Podcast.
Thank you both. It's great to be here. But by the way, PJ, you have the most wonderful podcast voice.
Oh, thank you.
You know, he
and you too, Tom. You too.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Have a little love every once in a while, would you? Jeez.
I was going to compliment you on your fashion. I'm loving the.
I thank you. That is can I tell you why we didn't talk about it? Because PJ and I, oftentimes when we get on the show, we talk about each other's attire. I actually wore this shirt expecting to get a rise out of PJ, but I think he's just we have worn out the path of talking about each other.
No, you know what? All right. To be honest, because I have all this copy I got to read, I normally have you guys very small at top. So I could tell you had something on, but I'm now looking at it that it's beautiful. That you should be at a luau, resting comfortably. Where's your drink with the umbrella in it?
Right after the show. It's waiting for me.
That's when you go to sleep.
That's exactly what I was about to say.
Yeah. So let's talk robots in Disneyland. Mike, as PJ shared with the audience, your first job was animating robots for Disneyland. That's a heck of a first job. I wonder how that happened. First professional job. Yeah, I assumed that. My first job was working at Arby's, flipping. Well, there wasn't burgers actually. They sell roast beef, but
yeah, like
nevertheless,
cut meat. Arby's
that's right. It's delicious. It's not healthy for you, but
I'm
still a fan.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear how this experience of animating robots for Disneyland influenced the way you think, and also did that set the stage for you starting your career in Hollywood?
Yes and no. So, funny story. When I was a kid, I was obsessed. Like I had kind of a dysfunctional family, like I think most Americans must. And when I was a kid, I had 2 uncles that lived down in LA, and I grew up in Northern California in the Bay Area. So every Thanksgiving, it was like go down to Uncle John and Uncle Tom's house, and they amazingly live right by Disneyland. So that was kind of like the pinnacle of the year, was going to Disneyland, and it really influenced me. And so when I was in high school, I had really awful high school art, but I had somehow, and this is before the internet, I'm pretty old. So I found this art like shop in LA, like near Disneyland, that sold animation cells. So I was obsessed with Disney and animation. And so I bought these cells and I painted a couple. I did some custom art and I had it on the wall. And long story short, we had a wedding at my house. And one of the guests was looking at the really crummy art that I had done and was basically like, do you want to be an animator? And being a big fan of Ghostbusters, where they ask, are you a god? And the morals always say yes, I never say no. I said,
Mm-hmm.
yes. Right. And at that point, she's like, my brother is one of the top animators at Disney. And if you're ever down in LA and you ever want to get a personal tour of Walt Disney Studios, you just say the word. And of course I was like, word, right? Let's do it. So the next week I'm down there, and my hour lunch became 2 days. Now this is like the good old days. They're in Burbank at the time, and they were working on Aladdin. So Aladdin and Lion King, I believe. Lion King was definitely, I remember the artwork. So I remember walking through the hallway, and this one guy is in the hallway. Like, hey kid, check this out. And it was the lion head from Aladdin. Now if I cut ahead to my career, I did CG animation, one of the first CG animators. So being in that moment of like seeing this computer generated animation was like super awesome, to this 16-year-old kid. And at that point I was like, okay, I have to do this. How do I work at Disney? And well, first off, you should be a little older, kid. But second off, you should go to the art school that Walt Disney founded called Cal Arts. So I immediately contacted Cal Arts, said, hey, I'm going there. And they're like, no, you're not. We're full. Like, you can submit for next year. I don't think you understand. I'm going there. I'm not taking a no for an answer. I probably like call them every day. And so finally I send in my portfolio, and I get this little letter back, right? I'm a little 16-year-old kid. I got 2 years of high school left, and I open the letter, my mom's like, yeah, it's okay. Maybe next year. And I'm reading, dear Mr. Murphy, we want to inform you that you're in, right? So now I have a whole new problem. Now I got to like get my GED and drop out of high school and all that. But so I go to Cal Arts, and upon graduating, I got an internship at Walt Disney Imagineering in the Tahunga building, if any geeks are out there. And I was in the training for the animatronics. So we had this thing called the hippie crane, which was from a ride that they had dismantled. And back then you'd have to, I don't know how it is now, but it was all these knobs. So you would turn the knobs and you would layer animation. So you might get the guy to turn his head, and then you layer it, and then, it'd start to look kind of organic and natural. And during that time, CG animation was coming out. So long story short, I was only in that internship for a couple of months, like for just like I think like 2 months. And then I got a really good job offer to go and start getting trained in CG animation. So I said, bye robots. And I went and did that. But that was a very interesting job that they'd actually, after I got my animation, my computer animation job, where they were paying me like $12 an hour as an intern. They're like, hey, if you come back, we'll pay you $80 an hour, and you're going to go to Tokyo and work on a big ride. And I said no, but I like looking back, like $80 an hour when you're like 20 is, I should have done it. So it was a very it was a cool experience to because again, being a Disneyland fan, having the opportunity to actually be at Imagineering. And if anybody listening does not know what Imagineering is, that is the business leg of Disney that designs the theme parks and the resorts. So that was like my dream as a kid to work there, and I gotta check it off my list. And then years later, I became a Disney animator. I gotta check that off my list. So
that's very cool. That's very cool. So I have actually a few questions and a comment. I'm going to start with the comment first. Tal, I think something that we've seen a lot through our podcast is persistence and not taking no for an answer as long as consent's not involved, right? So we're
caveat. Thank you. Well done, PJ.
Thank you. I try. So we have a lot of instances where you have individuals who are like, I want to do this, and door shuts. And they're like, no, I want to do this, and door shuts. And so I think that even something as, hey, I want to go to Cal Art or Caltech?
Yeah, Cal Arts.
Cal Arts. I want to go to Cal Arts, and Cal Arts is like, nah, we're full. And you kept at it. And what was that drive? Was it just because you're like, this is the goal I want, and no one's going to tell me no? Was it because some people get jazzed by just the challenge of it, right? Like, is this something, is this a personal goal I can set for myself? What made you be so quote unquote pushy or
annoying?
Yeah, exactly. With that, like what got you in that?
My reality was I was going to do that. It was just like, you don't understand, I'm doing that. Like in my mind, I'd already made my mind up that was my reality, and no one was going to tell me no. And I had to commit, like, if you didn't believe me, I'd be like, no, here's why we're doing this. And I I probably did like 3 versions of my portfolio. I remember I'd send in like, this sucks, like do more of this. I said again, it's getting better, but right. So I think that they recognized that first off, I was not taking no for an answer. And that in that case, passion trumps technique, right? Because I was not very good. But my heart was in it. And I think that you guys may agree or disagree with this, but I think if your heart's in it, it powers you to get to the point where you're actually good enough to do the thing that you've been dreaming of doing, right? Michael Jordan didn't, he wasn't the best basketball player the first time he stepped on the court when he was 5 years old, right? He had to work at it. So if you're not, motivated.
I think, Mike, that we have had guests on the show, including, I'm thinking of Bill Harper, a recent guest, who shared with us that Skip, absolutely, Skip Martin from Kool and the Gang, the lead singer of Kool and the Gang. They had actually disparate perspectives. So I'm glad you raised the both. So Skip believed from a very young age that he was destined to do great things. I don't know that he knew that he would write Celebration and literally be heard by billions of people, but he believed he was destined to do great things. On the other hand, Bill shared with us that it was through being told what he couldn't do and actually accepting that was actually correct. He was thinking about being an engineer. His mother told him he wasn't cut out for it, which is motherhood Hall of Fame there. Yes. A professor told him he wasn't cut out for it, and there was a third person that told him he wasn't cut out for it. I think it was he'd wanted to design sports cars, and someone essentially told him, well, you might get to design the cigarette lighter, but you're not going to design any sports cars. There are only about 5 people in the world to do that. And rather than do what you chose to do, he chose to pivot. Now, I think the point that we made in both interviews is that you need to know yourself, and you need to know whether you have such a passion for whatever it is you're pursuing that being told no is a motivator, or nothing more than a warning, or than a bump, just I have more work to do. And also being able to be true and being able to be honest enough with yourself to recognize, yeah, I'm not really passionate about it, or I'm not certain this is where I want to go, and accepting that maybe you need to pivot. So it sounds like, Mike, you very clearly at a fairly young point in your life felt you had found your calling. Why? I mean, maybe for the sake of our audience, because I'm sure there are people in our audience who are still grappling with what their calling is. Why do you think you were so clear-minded about that?
From a young age, I've had a vision of what I want to do with my life. And so far, all the things I've wanted to do, like I have a very complex vision of what I've done and how that's going to get me to the next step, which I can't reveal it here, but some big stuff is like happening, and so far so good. At any point the souffle could wilt, but so far all these random things that I've done in my life are stacking up to this big vision that I've had since I was a wee child. And that persistence of vision has allowed me, despite reality at points, right? When everything, like nothing is going your way and you're like, I'm still trudging through the desert. My last water bottle is way past, but I'm not going to turn around. I'm going to keep going. And for me, at least, like that desire, I know where the oasis is. So I'm going to keep going no matter what, even if I have to die trying, because like.
But why did you know it? What was it? What was it about it what was it about this pursuit that so appealed to you?
I couldn't tell you.
But you knew you did. But you knew it did.
It's just my reality. Like that's what I'm doing. I can't imagine doing anything else. I'm not interested in anything else, right? And what I want to do has so many different facets to it. So I've been able to kind of like zig and zag, but the spine of it's always been that trajectory where I'm heading. And I meet a lot of people, unfortunately, who don't know what they want to do. Like you mentioned, they just don't have that. I don't know if it's a confidence or it's a vision or it's a passion. There's all these different things. But for me, I think that growing up, and I was like I was like the definition of a wimpy kid. I was like small. If you can see him in the podcast.
Did you have a diary?
I did, but actually I was the animation director of that movie. Hence,
were you really? I got to tell you, I read those books to my children. They loved them. And I gotta admit, I enjoyed them too.
Yeah, they're really good. Jeff Kinney is a fantastic writer. So hey Jeff, if you're listening, so I as a kid, my escapism was movies, and the E.T. and Raiders and Gremlins, all the kind of Amblin movies. I think most people grew up with those. And going to Disneyland and watching the animated, Walt Disney's classic animated movies and listening to soundtracks. Like my first job, when I was 14, I got a job solely so I could buy a Laserdisc player and a big screen TV. So I was probably the only 14-year-old kid. You go in, half his room was a big TV, and I've got the surround sound. This is like good old days, Dolby surround. And that's just because I wanted to make movies. I wanted to be I wanted to tell stories, basically. And I was obsessed with it.
That's awesome.
I think it's maniacal. Maybe.
No. Look, everyone has a goal, right? Normally when I say that, I'm making fun of someone's inability to produce a good goal, right? Mm-hmm. So like, if they're like, I'm gonna go out and get trash done. I'm like, all right, well, everyone's got a goal.
Or make $1 billion or something big. Yeah. But
But I mean, you're 14 years old and you're like, I want a Laserdisc player and I want a big screen TV. And I mean, that's awesome, right? I don't know. I get it. Like,
I gotta say, I mean, I don't know. My son also said both those things, and he said, "Dad, can you buy him for me?"
And my dad was like, "Get a job." Like, oh,
right. Is that right? Well, yeah. Your dad was a better man than me.
So you've been. I mean, obviously we didn't even cover your resume well enough, but you've been involved in Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, and to one of my very good friends, her favorite actor of all time, Vin Diesel in Fast and Furious. I mean, you've been involved in all these things, which is amazing, but you also then became an entrepreneur, which has to be a total mind shift for you. So what was the moment, and I get it, right? Where you're sitting there and you're settling in with the fact, because once you get that genius of an idea in, where you're like, you know what, I'm sitting here making other people's dreams come true. I could see how that next step to, okay, I'm going to make my own dreams come true, kind of falls right afterwards. What was that moment like for you? When was there did someone say something to you? Were you challenged in some way? Like how did you know that you want to become an entrepreneur?
My entire life, people had always said I was very entrepreneurial. I remember at one point at Cal Arts, every Disney movie that would come out, they would have they would screen it at the El Capitan. So I was one of the rare kids, because I had that job when I was a kid. I sold my Laserdisc player, and I bought my grandma's car, which, boy, the chicks loved that car. It was a poop brown Honda hatchback. So being facetious, it was like,
I had a Mercury Cougar.
We would have been like dorks together. It'd be great.
Yes.
So I went down. I realized that I could go and buy I could pre-sell the tickets that were, I don't know, $5 each, and I could turn around and sell them for a transaction fee to my fellow students for like $10, right? So I made one year when Nightmare Before Christmas came out, from all the animators, I made like $200, and I was like making it rain, right? And I remember one of my friends, Melanie, screaming at me, "I realized you made a profit," and I was like, "Yeah, what's wrong with that? You're such an entrepreneur." I'm like, "Oh, don't call me that name." So I'd always had that kind of business sense.
Did it ever occur to you to start something? I don't know, maybe call it, let's say, Ticket Master? Anything like that?
That was actually my company. No, no, it would have been great. No, this is before the internet, right? This is like you had to buy tickets. Okay. It was crazy. So I'd always been very entrepreneurial, and as a filmmaker, I was always like developing my own projects and stuff, and so it got to the point I was on Fast and Furious. I think it was 4, but it may have been. I think it was 4. Fast and Furious 4.
Here they all blur together.
I worked on 3 of them, so they do actually blur together. So, or 2 of them, they blur together. I don't know, but so I'm on the movie and I'm on the Universal backlot, and I'm working, post-production visual effect. Like I was doing a thing called previs. We can get into that if you want to down the road, but I was working insane hours. You're working like 10-hour days, and then you've got, your 2 hours commuting in traffic, good old LA traffic to drive half a block. And I realized that like I wasn't ever going to have any freedom. Now the irony is, as an entrepreneur, I have even less freedom. But you work 60 hours for yourself instead of someone else. But I digress. So I recognize I was kind of like, what am I going to do? I can't do this the rest of my life. And prior to that, I'd seen the Rich Dad Poor Dad book. And my initial response was, that's stupid, right? But now in this point of despair, I'm like, I'll read it, right? So I read the book and I'm just like, wow, the richest people in the world create an IP. They do the work once and then they get paid forever. And then I'm like, wait, whoa, that's like every movie studio, like every director I love, like Steven Spielberg, Walt Disney, all these amazing people, they made a movie and they get royalties forever. And I was like, mind blown. So at that point, I went on this journey of how can I actually do that? And that, it took like 3 or 4 years from that inception in my mind. So that was really the moment. And then the second sort of event that happened that really made me say, like, you've got to do this, was a few years later. I was working on a movie that shall remain nameless. And the producer, basically, it's Friday night. I've got my suitcase ready. I'm going to fly up to Northern California for my grandma's 100th, at this point, it's 96th birthday. She lived for another 8 years after that. So I'm thinking this could be grandma's last birthday. And boy, all the Murphys get together and we eat corned beef and whatever Irish people do. So I'm like, I'm not missing it for the world. And I love corned beef, but I can't get it in Slovenia.
Who doesn't? I mean,
I have a fantastic recipe for it as well.
Oh man, send it over after. So long story short, I've got this crew I've got 15 people. We're just working crazy hours. And the producer calls me and says, hey, Mike, can I talk to you? I'm like, yeah, what's up? I just want to tell you, you're doing a great job. You guys are doing more footage than I've ever seen. You guys are crushing it. I want to thank you. I'm like, oh, great. Thank you. I'm thinking that's it. It's a polite compliment. But he goes, where are you going? It's Friday night. I'm not working the weekend. I'm going to see my grandma. But why? He goes, no, actually, you're working tomorrow. You're going to be working for the next 4 months. We're really behind on the product, the movie. You're not going anywhere. I'm like, I don't think you understand. Like, I'm going. No, I think if you do that, I'm going to blacklist you. Kind of under the table. It's like, I don't think we should do that. And that's when I was like, F this. Like, I have to have the freedom to be creative and at the very least, like, control my time, be able to see my grandma. So that I didn't right then quit. I didn't do it. I should have, but that was like, okay, that moment when the light bulb goes off and life's like, proceed with caution. So at that point, I started doing investigating and realizing what I could do, what kind of business I could start. And during that time, I was teaching animation. So I had a lot of, I was a university professor at a school in Burbank, Woodbury College. And around that time, I started getting asked to lecture at other schools. So I had traveled around the world a few times lecturing, and I thought, well, I'll just make an animation online training. And so I started that, and right out of the gate, I got one client. It was a school in Malaysia, and they asked me, because during that time, and I was investigating, how do you sell information? This is like, now it's like, it's so common, but back then it was totally fresh. And I had taken a course, one of my marketing mentors, a guy named Jeff Walker, product launch formula. So Jeff was teaching about how you basically create a digital course and you could sell it and blah, blah, blah. So I kind of had, I understood that that was a thing. And so when the school's like, hey, do you want to move to Malaysia and teach full time? I said, no, like, no, I'm not doing that. Thank you very much.
No way. I'm moving to Slovenia. Oh, was that later?
Yeah, I'm going to go to Slovenia. I was actually
right.
like, I'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
So I said, I'm not going to do that. But what I can do is I can systemize my information and I can build a process where I can be mentoring your students, but not physically there. Now, this was before Zoom, so I remember the technology was really wacky back then. But long story short, I built this whole system. It was a year-long program for the students. It was taking groups of like 10 to 12 college kids. I mean, we were talking like 18 to 21-year-olds. These are like babies, if you will. And getting them to work together as a group and go through every step in a production pipeline to make a short animated film. Now, by all logic, this should not work, but it worked because I had it so planned out. So at that point, it was scalable, and I did not have to move to Malaysia. I was able to anywhere in the world teach this class. And then that was so successful that I was able to quit my career in Hollywood, move to Slovenia, and then I joined a business mastermind, and everybody in that group was like, hey, what do you, like, help us. Like, how did you do that? And so I was kind of reluctantly kicking and screaming. I became a branding marketing sort of consultant guy, and we can get into that. But that was how that process started. But it came from having my freedoms basically stripped from me.
Well, let me recap what I heard. I think first and most importantly, I think we are going to need to get back to the corned beef. But
Yes.
let's put a pin in that.
I didn't have dinner, so you're talking.
All about it.
Yeah, same here. But all kidding aside, I think you talked about something really, you said something as an aside that I actually want to get back to. You said, I should have quit my job right there and then. And I would argue that you wisely chose not to. And there are likely listeners on the podcast who are contemplating an entrepreneurial journey and are currently working. And generally speaking, the appropriate path for most people, unless you're independently wealthy and can just afford to tell someone to go pack it, is to be judicious, make sure that before you tell anyone to go pound sand, you've actually done your homework, you know exactly what you want to do, or at least you have a very good sense of what you want to do, and you've begun to take some steps in that direction. That's generally speaking the wiser thing to do. The ego is what might drive you to tell someone to go pound sand. Logic and common sense, and frankly, if you did any research, what you'd find is that taking that approach significantly increases your odds of struggling and then finding yourself back on the job market as opposed to successfully thriving as an entrepreneur. So I just wanted to make that point. But I also want to get back to something that, quite frankly, you said something that it on one level is humorous, but on another level merits reflection, because it talks to your views about the balance of work and life. You said, I quit my career in Hollywood to move to Slovenia. And I think many people would say, I moved from Slovenia and my goal was to start a career in Hollywood. So on some levels, that sounds like you did it backwards, but for you, clearly it wasn't so. You had a different perspective on what represented your version of work-life balance, what represented your version of the kind of journey you wanted to be on. How did you figure that out? And what advice might you have for our listeners who are contemplating figuring that out?
Great question. For me, like, the dream as a kid was to work in Hollywood, and I had done it. So at that point, I've been doing it for 15 years. And the reality is, you're looking at a computer, you're sitting in traffic, you're being told, you have no freedom. That wasn't 100% of the time, but in that instance was enough for me to be like, thank you very much, but bye. And also living in LA, you're, no offense to people that love LA, but it's not, for me, it's not a very spiritually fulfilling place. Like, there's no real nice nature. I mean, there's the beach, granted, but I like trees, I like mountains, I like fresh air. And also because of my youth, going to Disneyland was so special. So when I got here, like literally Slovenia looks like friggin' fantasy land. It's like there's literally a castle like on every hill. It's unbelievable. So I just fell in love with it. And then also, I fell in love with my wife, and she's part of this. And now that I've got Slovene children, it just seems so
So were you a mail order groom?
I was, yeah. She ordered me from
Fabulous.
America.
Yeah.
That's
Wow,
what
you're
everyone's like,
doing everything backwards. I love it. I love
yeah,
it.
I like to do the opposite. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean my quality of life, maybe somebody who's living in Malibu may disagree, but for my quality of life, I never sit in traffic. I have fresh air. I drive an hour and a half south, and I'm at the Mediterranean. Literally, it looks like Tuscany. I live in the Alps, so I didn't see any downside to it. And I did that prior to Zoom, right? So this was like really difficult 10 years ago, like insanely difficult. We made it work. Now, like the world has changed after COVID. And so I would say if you're thinking of being an entrepreneur, the reality is you're going to go from your desk at work to being at home and pretty much being completely isolated. And you're going to be staring at your computer. When you have calls, it's going to be on Zoom. And for me as an introvert, that sounds great to me. But if that's not something you're used to, then to your point, Tal, I wouldn't just quit my job emotionally, like, oh, quit, right? I would start and try to like get that minimum viable product. Like what is that thing that you're really passionate about doing? I talked to someone earlier today, very successful guy. And he's like, look, every time I chase money, I failed, but every time I chased passion, I succeeded financially. And I think I can attest to that, right? So you got to really figure out, like when I was a kid, I'm doing this. Like, what
PJ,
is
I'm
that?
going to say the magic words t-shirt moment, because I
Yes,
think
I know.
that was lovely.
I literally was picturing that. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, this is how it's going to be. This is what's going to look like. Yeah, it's good. It's good.
We do t-shirts, Mike. It's one of our things. I don't know if you know that, but you've already signed away your rights to that statement, and
Yeah,
we're going to put on a
Awesome.
t-shirt, put your name on it, and make all the money.
Yeah.
All right, do it.
We
Go
love
for it.
that.
You'll make about 57 cents. I love it. So
Well, that's almost the value of your company. So we
70
may
cents.
buy you.
I know it's a little less. Okay, you make 70 cents.
Yeah. Mhm.
Once we get to 75, we're gonna,
You beat me. I love it.
Hostile
Yeah, I
takeover.
mean,
I'm sensing a hostile takeover.
no, in all reality, like
Yeah.
if I try to start some companies or some ventures, some schemes where it was about making money, you're counting a whole, you're calculating all this crap in your head, and it never works out. But when you're really on fire about something, when you really love something, and everyone's saying that's a stupid idea, you shouldn't do it, blah 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 blah, all the naysayers, but you're still like, I don't think so. I think it's good. That's when you found that thing that is going to fuel you getting past all those no's and all those hurdles. And it's not, I don't know, you look at these guys like Elon Musk and Richard Branson, and it's kind of celebratory, I'm an entrepreneur, right? But the reality is it's like, it's a grind. It's way harder. I'd be way better off back in my career, sitting in traffic, because you don't have all the responsibilities of, I don't know if I can swear, but OF.
Yes, you
Can
can.
I do payroll this week? Right? Or
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, it's 3 a.m. and I forgot to send that proposal to the client, right? There's exponentially more responsibilities. Like a business is like having a baby that's just always crying and sick and always needs you, and you do it because you love that baby and because it's cute, but it's like, oh my gosh, if I could just get an hour break, right? So that's how that's just the reality of business. And then you get to a point, I had coffee with someone this weekend, a very successful tech entrepreneur. And he's like, yeah, I got my 3 businesses and I set them up, but I basically put integrators in. He follows the EOS entrepreneurial operating system. So like, I got my integrators in, and now I basically don't work, right? That's awesome. And that's where you want to get to, but that's not where you start. I'm not even there yet. I wish I could be.
I'm sure PJ has a follow-up on an interesting topic, but before we go there, I want to dive into the human side of making a decision.
Mm-hmm.
How old were you when you moved to Slovenia?
I must have been, I want to say like 36, and that
36
was
years old. So you're not a
not a
very
spring
young
chicken.
person. Yeah, you're not a
No.
spring chicken.
So
You're
today I'm
also
48. You can Google me and see my birthday.
very much in the prime of your career. How, I mean, were you scared shitless that you were making the biggest mistake of your life?
Oh yeah.
Or,
So yeah,
okay.
oh yeah, 100%. I had this beautiful apartment in West Hollywood. So my apartment used to be John Travolta's apartment and Quentin Tarantino's apartment.
Wow.
I mean, in that building, right? So like my neighbor would always get like studio tape, studio mail for Quentin Tarantino. I was like, he's moved on, right? So it's a very historic, beautiful building.
Interesting aside, you know where Quentin Tarantino lives most of the time now?
He lives up on the top of the Hollywood.
No, he lives in Tel Aviv.
Really?
Yeah, that's where he spends most of his time. Yeah. Anyway,
Go
as an
Quentin.
Israeli, I would know that. That's
You
why I
know
know
that.
that.
I had no idea. Well, I guess
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
a traveling man.
He
So
is.
I lost my thought. It's like 10:30 at night.
You had a beautiful apartment and
A beautiful apartment. Yes,
Beautiful
thank you.
apartment. Yeah. Mhm.
Thank you. And so when I made this decision, I had, I was like 36, and so everything I own is on the lawn for sale because I got to sell everything so I can move. And I've got this like $300 deluxe KitchenAid. You know those mixers? They're absolutely, if you drop it on someone's head, they're dead. It's like a murder weapon. They're so dead. And I'm haggling with this guy from next door. He's like trying to give me like $15 for this thing. He's like, well, there's a little scratch on this side. Can I give you 10? And you just get to the point where like, what am I doing? Like this. Yeah, by the way, I was like, just take it, dude. Like, F you, go away. But to literally like give up everything, all my friends, all my comfort, everything, and go off on this whim, if you will, right? And my parents are like, you're an idiot. My friends are like, what the hell are you? Like, everyone's like, dude, get off the edge, don't jump. Like, it's okay, man. And I'm like, no, I'm jumping. I like, trust me, I'm not gonna splatter. I might break my leg, but like, I got to do this. So taking that leap of faith was extremely stressful and scary. And I had moved, and when you're in the startup phase, you have absolutely zero capital. So I spent 2 years literally like being homeless, where I would be up at my parents in their basement, and then every 90 days, because I had my wife, who was the fiance at the time, who's from Europe, so every 90 days we'd have to move. So we would go from Northern California to Malaysia to Slovenia. We didn't have a place, so we're always like in some random, somebody's attic or something. I did that for 2 years, and it was scary. And every time I talked to my friend, like, come back, dude. It's like, no, I'm not giving up.
I gotta say, it does sound, dare I say, somewhat insane. That's the word I was thinking of. And it doesn't look like you regret it now. It looks like things worked out in a way that is as you'd want it to be, right? And I guess my point there is there's no guarantee. So we certainly wouldn't feel comfortable telling our listeners and viewers that we can assure them that they can quit their high-powered job that represents maybe their realization of their lifelong dreams and move to a not that well-known former Eastern European country, and it will turn out beautifully. But I do think that what I'm hearing from you, and I do think that's beautiful, is you felt a calling to do something different, rather than suppressing that and forcing yourself to carry on because you had accomplished so much and you had so much to lose. You followed your heart, and yes, it turned out beautifully, but regardless of how it would have turned out, the fact that you followed your heart is noteworthy and frankly worthy of respect. And it's hard to imagine that if you had stayed put and been miserable, that you'd look back now 12 years later and suppose you had listened to your friends and hadn't done it. We don't know where you'd be, of course. Maybe right now you'd be running a studio, but it sounds like you found the sweet spot of life-work balance. And we repeatedly use life-work as opposed to work-life balance. And that worked really, really well for you. And there's no shame in that. Quite to the contrary, that's courage right there. That's braving. And it turns out braving business because you went into business, but that is the definition of courage, what you did.
It was foolish to a degree and courageous also, but I had kind of a 20-year business plan. So if we want to get spiritual about it, when I was at one of these marketing retreats in Arizona, Jeff Walker every year would have I don't know if he still does it, but he'd have a thing in Arizona, Scottsdale. And after one of those, my now wife, but fiance at the time, or girlfriend at the time at that point, we drove up.
Did you say her name is Beyonce? I mean, I've heard Beyonce twice now.
Beyonce.
Oh, okay. All right.
First time I was
I got her away from Jay-Z. He's
yeah.
No,
the more I talk to you, and first of all, you do impressions, which, so you're not just an animator, you do impressions, facial impressions. So for those of you that are listening and not watching, you're missing out. Second, you kind of look like Dana Carvey. Has anyone told you that before?
No, I've not heard that before.
Really?
He's a great looking male model. If you don't know.
I am a big fan of Dana Carvey. One of my favorite moments of Saturday Night Live, if you've not seen it, you must go see it on YouTube, is him singing Chopping Broccoli. Have you seen Chopping Broccoli?
We'll go
Chopping Broccoli. If you have not seen Chopping Broccoli, literally just go to YouTube, type in Dana Carvey Chopping Broccoli, and then thank me later.
I'm going to put
one of the greatest moments in Saturday Night Live history.
On my board. All right.
And all the church lady stuff, you got to do that too.
Oh goodness.
Aiden?
Yeah.
Dana Carvey is classic. The again, I lost my train of thought. I had so much fun with you guys.
Yeah. Well, that's part of our thing, right? We believe very much in helping people lose their train of thought, and
yes,
and then
appreciate that.
We take them to where we want them to go, and thank you for playing along.
These guys like to have Europeans on 10:30 at night on a podcast.
That's right. That's right. Well, you know what? We had I'm not going to say which country, but we had a guest on. And that guest was far away from us in North America. And for us, for PJ and myself, it was very late at night. Or you know what? Let me take that back. We are a bit old, so it was late. And this guest, for him, it was early. I mean, I'm talking like top of the morning. And he was well caffeinated, whereas PJ and I were barely keeping our eyes open. Wow. And it was one of the rare moments since we started recording this podcast where I couldn't keep up. I mean, literally, I couldn't keep up. I kept asking PJ, where are we? What's going on? And he kept saying to me, I'm honestly not sure. And so,
it sounds like it's somebody in Australia or something, right?
It was far. You can't walk there.
Okay.
Yeah, it was far. Yeah.
No,
PJ, let's take the reins of our show back. I think we need to rein it in a little bit.
No, this was. Look,
is it time to talk about about the corned beef again? No, not yet. Maybe later.
No, but we can talk about tacos. Something I don't get. Actually, I'm very excited to say that here in Slovenia, for 10 years, for 12 years, I've been dreaming that somebody, manifestation, dreaming that somebody would open up a taco stand, and finally they did, and it's amazing. So I finally feel I'm back home. Wow. I remember we were talking about Sedona. So for everyone, it's like, oh yeah, Mike,
your business, your business, Jeff Walker. Yep.
So I went to Bell Rock, very famous place, and I was meditating, and I'm like, just debating, am I gonna stay in Hollywood, do that, or am I gonna go and do this crazy shit on the side? And I had this vision of like my entire life, like it was there, and it's nuts. It was just nuts. I'm like, that's not reality. But then I remembered back when I was a kid, and I had this dream, I was going to go to this art school and work in Hollywood and work at Disney and do all these things, and like all of that happened. So I was like, okay, I guess anything's possible. And I, was true to that. So I would say to your listeners, don't be as reckless and insane as I've been. But if you know spiritually, like if you know in your soul, like you're meant to do something, then it's your duty to do it. You can't listen to the naysayers. You can't listen to the parents and the friends and all the people that don't quite get what you're doing. But you do have to then go and have a very strategic plan for doing it. Right.
Yeah, you just can't wing it.
Can't wing it. No.
I mean, you can to a point. You know, I agree with what you're saying. And by the way, there's a lot of, and not surprisingly, as we've interviewed successful people, in many cases, people who have gone through transitions and pivots, one common denominator is risk taking. That's a part and parcel of being an entrepreneur, obviously, is being prepared to take risks. The second part of that is the recognition that the outcome is not in and of itself the only measure of success. That in many ways, it's not having the regret of not having attempted to do something bold.
Yeah.
We've heard that repeatedly, and I think you said it, when it is a passion, it just so happens that you're also likelier to be successful. I don't think that's a coincidence. Obviously, if you care deeply about something, you tend to do better at it. We talked earlier about Michael Jordan. I would say, of course, there's a degree of talent required. I mean, you know, Michael, and talent is a huge part of the equation, but so is luck, because God made him 6'6", and he could have been 5'6", and you know what? Then he's Muggsy Bogues, and we don't remember him nearly as well as we do Michael Jordan. He doesn't have the shoes, right? Yeah. So reality is, it is a combination of those things. You have to have a passion. You have to be willing to take risks. You have to have talent, and you have to have luck. It's all of those things.
It's a combo, but if you don't have the vision of what you want, and then you don't figure out the gap between what you want and your skills to get it, and then actively and consistently work to acquire the skills, knowing you're not gonna, slam dunk on the first try. If you could be humble enough to recognize that you're not perfect, and you've got a crap ton to learn, then consistently you're going to get there. Right. Or you can quit. Like, I try to, probably 95% of people quit, but I think the successful people are the crazy, I think there's a great Steve Jobs quote, I'm paraphrasing, but the crazy people are the people that change the world. And that's because despite reality, they say, I don't care. Like I'm going to do this thing, and then I will prove you that is reality. So if your conviction is so strong, you build that thing that the world needs, but didn't know they needed, or didn't know was even possible.
Create your own reality.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll give you a story about, Disneyland. Walt wanted to do this. He wanted to build this place, and his brother's business partner was like, no, Walt, that's stupid. That's not going to work. Like, everyone was like, this is stupid. Like, nice, Walt. All right. But he didn't give up, and he mortgaged his house, and he did all this, Disney historians may say I may get my facts wrong, but basically he took every risk in the book, and he finally got it to the point where he had the proof of concept, and then people bought into it. And then his brother said, okay, I'm going to go and help find the funding. And then ABC said, I'm going to fund this. And all these people started coming in, following along. And now Disneyland's a gold standard, and it's built the entire theme park and entertainment and leisure industry. So if he just listened to the naysayers, we wouldn't have that. And there's so many examples of that, of great entrepreneurs with strong visions who just said, F it, I'm going to do it anyway.
Well, for sure. And actually that has probably been the most consistent theme of all that we've seen, which is that winners and successful entrepreneurs, and frankly, happier people, refuse to quit in the face of, provided they're passionate about something. Obviously, that doesn't mean that, you keep on doing. I mean, there is that definition of madness component. It is not what we're advocating for. What we are saying is, if you have a deep passion for something and you deeply believe in it, it is a mark of a person likelier to be successful that you stick to it. And we've seen it persistently in episode after episode from one success story after another, the moments where it would have been not only, understandable, but maybe logical to throw in the towel, choosing not to in those moments because of a deep, either an inner voice or just deep faith or something inside you that tells you, no, I'm not quitting, I'm persisting. Know that that is a mark of a person that has what it takes to be successful. I can't guarantee you success because you're also going to need talent and you're going to need luck. But I can tell you that that perseverance, that willingness to stick with it in the face of daunting challenges is one of the most significant indicators that you have what it takes to be successful as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
It's like the movie Rocky. Like the point of that movie wasn't that he won, it was that he stayed in the ring long enough, right? So that's how I see being an entrepreneur. It's like, I'm going to get knocked out, but am I going to get back in the fight, or am I going to just go away crying? Right? Because eventually you're going to win. You're not, I forget who said this, but it's like, I'm an overnight success 10 years in the making, right? That's really the way it is.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, there's another t-shirt for you.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't think we could take that one. I think that one's copyrighted. It's one of the ones we do not have our guests.
Yeah. No kidding.
Sign their rights to.
So really appreciate your sharing this whole journey about you following your dreams, but you also shared that you have a dream project that's coming out that early 2024. Will you share a little tidbit of something about it?
Okay, I'll give you a backstory. I can't really say much because there's deals in play and anything could fizzle, okay. And that,
Fair enough.
But basically, since I was a kid, I always wanted to, I was obsessed with Disneyland and making movies and all of that. So I'll just suffice by saying that for the last 10 years, I've been developing something, and at least as of today, it's moving forward. Now, again, it may not come to fruition. I may look back at this and say, why do I even tell people? But I think the act of telling people what you're doing, it's like burning your bridges. It makes it harder to not accomplish it when you actually live and breathe it and you put it out there. So all the random stuff that I've done in my whole life that everyone's like, you're nuts, dude. Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, back at Bell Rock, I had this vision, like, it hasn't been exactly the way I wanted it. Like, I didn't have every milestone in the time frame, but it's all evening out now, right? So the roller, it was like this crazy ride, but like it's now like all the pieces are sort of lining up at the 11th hour, and I've seen that pattern before in my life when it's like it gets to the point where you're like, oh, I guess this isn't going to happen, but you don't give up. Right. It's like you're resuscitating the person that's on life support. And then that one last breath you give them brings them back to life. And then you're going. So I guess follow me on social over the next year. I'm not really going
to. We will follow you on social, but we will also love to have you back. So if it does come to fruition, will you promise to come back and tell us all about it? And
I would love to. It'll be really big. If
is that right?
I should say when it happens.
When it happens.
It'd be really big.
Beautiful. I would say, I heard something I want to pull out of what you just said, which was that it's something that's been, 10 years in the making. A lot of times the biggest dreams of all take the longest time to percolate, and they do sometimes feel like they're on the verge of death. It sounds like maybe this is one of those ideas. I don't know what it is, but I would love to find out maybe right after we.
I can tell you guys after
stop
we
the recording. Yeah, well, we are. I hate to say it to our audience, but PJ and I are going to know.
Oh yeah, we are.
But I do think that having that intuition that something is worth sticking to, again, I think it's part and parcel of what we've been talking about. Mike, I'm not in the least surprised that you are clearly a person that's happy. It's written all over you, and that's maybe the greatest mark of success in life, is
Yeah.
being happy. Second to that, I think, is being able to say that you've lived your dreams and that you are continuing to live them every single day. I think you've accomplished things that, you know, you set out to accomplish as a young man, as a child, lived them, realize that you had a different passion, a different North Star, if you will, and chose to pursue it. That's courageous. And I think that, you know, quite frankly, you're someone that is an inspiration. So, you know, to the members of our audience who perhaps are interested in learning how you might be able to help them apply storytelling principles to build their business, to refine their offers, to help their marketing, to help them build their brand, how can people reach you, Mike?
Great question. Well, if you're interested in building a personal brand or creating your own digital course, anything like that, or group coaching program or mastermind, basically, if you're selling information, then go to thevisionaryplanner.com, and it's a 4-step process that I didn't invent, right? I just studied on my journey. I studied what people were doing, and I, with my background in visual effects and animation, I'm able to take really complex things and basically turn it into an instruction manual. So it's a step-by-step instruction manual for building out your brand. If you're interested in actually like working with me and having me build your brand for you, then you can go to Mike L. Murphy Productions. There's a button on the Visionary Planner to just work with Mike, and obviously that's a different price range. But and honestly, I don't know in 2024 how many more clients I'll be able to take if this other Project X happens on time. But yeah, it's where you can go. And you can also, if you want to, I think the coolest thing that I've got is I've got a beautiful website, mikelmurphy.com. I didn't design it, which is why I can accurately say it's really award-winning and great.
I would say this, as I've been on mikelmurphy.com, just make sure that your sound is not too high.
Don't crank the sound, or
do not crank the sound. You'll
yourself.
thank me. You'll thank me for it, particularly if you're in a public place. That's as someone who was in a public place and didn't do that.
That's amazing.
Oh man, you got a story for me.
Yeah. I just wanted, right before we wrap up, and first of all, Mike, this has been an amazing conversation. I am going to send both of you my brine recipe, as well as my whiskey orange glaze for the sauce for the corned beef. So I am,
you know, Mike doesn't know what, PJ, because I don't think he listened to the episode where we talked about it, that you are a champion barbecuer. You are a competitive barbecuer.
I am on an award-winning championship barbecue team.
He's a professional, Mike.
Nope.
Oh, wow.
All it means is I eat a lot, get drunk, and I support all the other guys because they're much better cooks than I am. But I can
I can help you with both of those things. I can eat and get drunk. This sounds great.
That's wonderful. I just want to point out one quick thing, though, is that a lot of what you're talking about, just especially in the last few minutes, I think it's very important for people to understand that there's a gratitude of life that people need to assess. Because I think a lot of times you go through some failures, you go through some trials and tribulations, you do things where people are like, I don't know why you're doing it. I don't know why you feel this way. Why are you pursuing this? But if you just take a step back and appreciate the fullness of the journey, I think a lot of times you'll see that things fall in place for you and gets you to where you are because you need to be there now. If that makes any sense, right? Like, because I've seen that in my own journey. Tal, I met you, and we were on something completely different, and now we're doing this. And and I think that a lot of people just need to embrace that gratitude for every step of the way, because a lot of times it is a beautiful journey.
Yeah. If you're obsessed with the destination, like I want to be on the beach in Maui, then you're not enjoying the flight, connecting with your kids, or the taxi ride where you're seeing these beautiful things. You know, it's like, and everyone I know that when they get to the destination, there's a new destination.
Of course.
So the line's always moving. So I think it's definitely be grateful, because being an entrepreneur sucks at times. You know, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It's freaking hard. You're taking all the risks. You know, everyone gets paid before you. You don't get sick days. You don't get unemployment. Like, you're just out there taking all the shots. So if you're not enjoying what you're doing, and you're not constantly making sure that you are moving towards that destination, it's not worth it. You know, like, you have to be humbled by what you're doing, and really appreciative that you have that opportunity to go off and at least try to do that thing. And another thing that I'll add is that often, and I've seen this so many times, we decide where we want to go, but the universe doesn't give us that yet. Like, we don't get that thing that we want until we're actually ready for it. So you might be going off in the weeds somewhere and go, I'm so off course. But if you don't give up, and you're constantly in your mind going, I got to get back there, it's just gonna, like, there's gonna, like, the portal's gonna open, you know, you're back where you want it to be, and it just magically works out. And I've had that happen. Like, so today I had a sales call with somebody. It turns out he runs a massive company, and I pitched him this thing that I wanted to do for Visionary Planner. And he's like, oh my gosh, dude, this is exactly, like, this is like fate that we found each other. So we're gonna have a, you know, maybe it doesn't go anywhere, but we're going to be having talks about that, developing that. And that's only because I'm marching on my journey. And as I'm doing it, the universe is just like, here you go, here you go, here you go. And you always have opportunities in front of you, but if your eyes aren't open to that, and you're not putting out your story of what you're passionate about, the other person doesn't know. And then they may have that missing thing that you need, but because you're not telling them what you're looking for, you never get it. So definitely be clear on what you want, tell people, be bold about it, and you're going to get there eventually.
Perfect.
Friends, our guest today was Mike Murphy. He has done some really cool things in Hollywood, and now he's helping businesses apply storytelling principles in creative ways to help them build their brands. He's been a fabulous guest, and the next time I'm in Slovenia, which is, I'm talking any day now, I'll look for the phone book. It might be difficult to find the Mike Murphy, but I'll try. And thank you again for being our guest today. We look forward to having you back.
All right. Appreciate you both. Thank you.
Thank you so much.